Give me a game where the owl bears are tame, where the orcs, their hit points are low, where never is seen a dragon that's green, and you always make your saving throw. Hey! Hello everyone, I'm Father Aaron, and welcome back to The Dungeon Minister! When last we encountered our party, they were returning to Honeywood to warn the mayor that an attack was imminent. They were sure that there were hordes of kobolds and gnolls right on their tail. Now, they weren't right behind them. In fact, I hadn't planned an attack on Honeywood at all. But, you know what? All right. In fact, it actually sort of solved a problem for me. The problem being we'd kind of gotten into a kobold rut, you know? All of the storylines that were presenting themselves were about pursuing these kobolds, finding out about these kobolds, stopping these kobolds. It was starting to get a bit boring. So I thought, this is good. They make an attack on Honeywood, and that is one big battle that can at least put the brakes on this. It can introduce a pause. Both sides will sort of, recover and recuperate and take some time in between, and the party can go pursue other things for a while, at least. So great. The attack will come. Now, the mayor has sort of seen this coming anyhow. You might remember he'd ordered the construction of a palisade all the way around the village. By the time that the adventurers return from their scouting trip, the palisade is not quite finished, about 100 feet to go, maybe a little over 100 feet. So once the warning comes in, the townspeople redouble their efforts and start working away on that thing as fast as they can. By the time the attack lands, they've got that down to a 30-foot gap. They're almost finished, but not quite. During the time that the workers are constructing the palisade, other preparations are happening in the village. And part of getting prepared for the battle, part of figuring out how to defend Honeywood is learning about Honeywood, learning about the town, and meeting some of the important people in town. And this gave me an opportunity to do a bit of not quite a lore dump, I guess an exposition dump, to give the party, the players, some idea of the world that they were inhabiting. Now, I did have an advantage because I had based Honeywood, the name came from Viva la Dirt League, but I had based the village on the village in which our church is located. And so I know it very well, my boys know it very well, they understood the layout of things, so that was easier to start with. I made some adaptations, but generally speaking, the physical layout, at least of the streets and some of the major buildings, is the same as the actual village. And it looks like, well, like this. The river snakes through in a backward S, and the roads are laid out around it. You can see all around the village that hash mark that indicates the palisade, and on the eastern side, well, there's the gap. Just across the river from the gap, there is the church. That's number 1 on the map. Down in the southeastern corner, you will see a tower that has been integrated into the wall. We'll get to that. At each river, there is a river gate, a portcullis which drops into the river when needed. And of course, all of the roads as they enter have gates. There is also on the western side a small hut. We'll get to that later as well. North of that is the mayor's home. It's a 2-story tower, very large and squat, but a tower nonetheless. And of course you can see the town docks in the center of the town. Now, of course, exploring the town includes, as I said, meeting some of the people. The first person in the town that the players had met was the mayor. He's the one who sent them on their first mission, after all. The mayor is not an adventurer of any kind. He's classified as a normal man. I rolled him up to have 5 hit points. He does have a suit of leather armor, and he carries a sword which he does not know how to use. He will not do any actual fighting unless the fight comes to him, and by that I mean within about 3 feet of him, which is probably best because he'd just get himself killed or get in the way or something. He will, however, direct and coordinate better than might be expected for a novice, but he leaves the real military leadership to Sir Trevor, who we'll meet in a minute. Interestingly, the PCs have never bothered to ask his name. They just call him Mr. Mayor. His name is Davith Scone. He's a widower, he has a daughter, and he enjoys music and long walks on the beach. Is he your match? No. I mentioned Sir Trevor. Sir Trevor is the head of the town guard. He's a 3rd level fighter. He has 23 hit points, full plate and shield, so an AC of 2. And he carries a +1 magical sword and has a ring of fire protection, which will come in handy later. Sir Trevor is an older man. He was knighted and given the keep on the Northern Sea. Aha, the keep that they explored. He was given that keep, not to mention a large sack of cash, for a minor service that he once did that drew a lot of attention. He fought off a handful of roving goblins who had attacked the Count Kilmarnock's mother-in-law's carriage, just as Sir Trevor happened along. A parenthetical here, thank you to Brian John for trying to teach me how to properly say Kilmarnock. I hope I'm a little closer, at least. Anyway, the Count was very grateful that his mother-in-law had been saved, and in response, and with his wife's prodding, knighted Trevor, gave him the keep, which had sat abandoned for like 150 some years, and a large sack of cash. Sir Trevor had originally meant to occupy the keep, but he discovered that it was a ruin, far from any town and, more importantly, far from any ale. Finding Honeywood well stocked with ale, and the lovely Molly serving it, he elected to settle in town and to forget the keep entirely. For a while, he made a show of patrolling the countryside, but the relative peace and the lures of drink, and of Molly, proved too much, and it cut his adventuring career short. He's now cresting 60, married to Molly, he's lost a step or two, and would really prefer just to stay home. He is, however, the captain of the town guard, and so he must fight. Now, I wanted Sir Trevor to be a higher level than the players, but not so much higher that he's just, way out of bounds, or that he would make this all too easy. I still wanted this to be difficult, and I wanted the player characters to be important pieces in the defense of the town. And if we had like a 20th level fighter, that just wasn't going to happen, right? So 3rd level was nice. It's not very high up. He's not that impressive, but this is a small village, very far away from any major cities. So although he's only 3rd level, up here, he's kind of a big deal. Speaking of that, another character that they meet. In the earlier adventures, as they found magical items, they brought them back to Honeywood, and they wanted to identify them to know what they were. And so I said, well, there's a magic user in town. Well, thinking about it later, I thought, a magic user in this little podunk place? I mean, we're nowhere near the Magician's Guild or any other towers or anything, so there really shouldn't be a big shot wizard here. But then I thought, well, how about a small shot wizard? Enter Sulix Ortmeyer. Sulix Ortmeyer was the name of a magic user that I played when I was a teenager. Anyway, here he comes again. Sulix is a very grumpy, solitary figure. He resents the mayor building the wall up to his tower and only grudgingly helps in the town's defense. His tower is not his by building or earning through experience. It belonged to a wizard who lived in Honeywood, but who died over 20 years ago. Sulix heard that it had become vacant, and, his adventuring career being stalled and his own tower looking unlikely, he decided to move to this small village where people would be impressed by his limited skills. He hasn't advanced in level or in skill in the past 16 years. So, he's breaking the rules, really. He shouldn't have a tower at this level, but part of what I wanted to bake into this is that Honeywood is far enough off the beaten track that kind of nobody notices. Nobody up here knows that he's not supposed to have a tower, and nobody down in Kilmarnock really knows he's up here. So it kind of flies under the radar. Because I needed a 7th level magic user. Why 7th level? Because at 7th level, you can cast a 4th level spell. Now, why do I want him to cast a 4th level spell? You'll see. Another member of the town, whom they have already met, is Parson Supple. Parson Supple is a cleric, a 4th level cleric. He's not an adventurer. He thought long ago that he might be, and he began with a group who explored the deep woods that are off to the west of Honeywood. He was always nervous, and he rarely entered actual combat. Eventually, a run-in with a wraith, which he failed to turn, and which proceeded to kill one of his party, convinced Supple to take up a more domestic, pastoral role. He was scarred by this. The wraith killed a friend of his. He's worn that guilt ever since because he tried to turn it and wasn't able to. And so he's worn that guilt ever since. The name, incidentally, comes from the book Tom Jones, and as it suggests, Parson Supple, he is relatively flexible. He's not a tough guy. He's not a strong man. He is, however, a compassionate man, which will turn up later. Rounding out the rogues gallery of named characters comes Rupert. Now, Rupert is a druid. Now, druids are neutral clerics who at 9th level can choose to become a druid. So Rupert is the highest level character in town. However, he is quite old, and he's starting to lose his awareness. In fact, in later adventures, he will send the party off on some quest, and when they return, he's forgotten that he sent them. He has no idea why they're coming and presenting these things to him. He's forgotten it entirely. Rupert doesn't get involved in the defense of Honeywood. He will only defend his own cottage, and then only if it is directly attacked. He presents nothing but a waste of time for the PCs. He's nice about it, but he's not interested. Rupert is mostly interested in re-establishing the giant bee population to Honeywood and replanting the towering giant flower plants that used to grow on what are now grasslands. So part of the lore of Honeywood, the name Honeywood, which I stole from Viva la Dirt League, the name Honeywood comes from this woods of flowers that used to surround it. Giant flowers, 12, 15, 20-foot tall plants. Enormous flowers, and where you get enormous flowers, you get enormous bees. So there were giant bees, which back in the day, the populace of Honeywood had tamed. And they ran a thriving honey-producing industry. Honey and mead, which is honey wine. That was what the village was known for. Incidentally, the caves that the kobolds had been in the very first adventure, those were cellars for the mead. So that ties that back in. Now, I mentioned that the palisade wall was not finished. There was a gap left. That is where the mayor is sending the PCs. Sir Trevor is going to coordinate the defense of the southwest corner. Sulix has only agreed to defend from his tower and to keep an eye on the nearby road on the east gate. He's just not cooperative. He'll stay in his tower, he'll keep an eye on the gate, and if called upon, he will answer the PCs if they need help. And this is where that 4th level spell comes in. Among the 4th level spells is Ice Wall. The thing about Ice Wall is that it will eventually melt, right? He can't cast it in advance. He can't have the wall all prepared, because what if the attack doesn't come for 10 hours? Then the ice wall has melted and there's no more protection there. So it has to be done when the attack is about to happen. Now, we've met the cast of characters inside Honeywood. There are also a couple of characters in the attacking army that we should meet. The first is Garrick. Garrick is a grizzled and deeply nasty gnoll. He has led his tribe in attacks on goblins for many years, and he knows small-scale combat, especially ambush, quite well. He's less versed in large-scale combat, but he does not realize this, and he has never attacked a fortified position. He is, however, shrewd, brutal and shrewd, and he will look for any weakness that Honeywood presents. The other character to meet is Perith. Perith is a kobold. He has risen to lead his fellow kobolds under Garrick and the other gnolls, although the gnolls are not aware of this. The kobolds, ever resentful and bitter, pretend to be only paying lip service to the gnolls, while actually very afraid of them. Perith is a coward at heart, but he's an opportunist. He will exploit any lowered guard, both in Honeywood and in the gnolls, and is just as likely to backstab Garrick as to attack the town. The attacking army consists of 34 gnolls, 12 of whom have bow and arrow, 107 kobolds, 40 of whom are archers, plus 6 wild boars and 2 bugbears. Remember the path that went from the keep up to the kobold caves that the adventurers went along, and they fought a bugbear there, right? And they left it dead along the path. Well, as the kobolds and gnolls came down the path to the keep, they found that body. And so when they decided they were going to attack Honeywood, they went and they sought out 2 other local bugbears and said, "Look what they've done to your friend. I bet you want revenge, don't you? We'll promise you as many villagers as you can eat. How's that?" And the bugbears joined up. Now, that puts the attacking army at 123. And in the BECMI rules, in the companion book, there is a system for large-scale combat. You can't play every single sword stroke, right? You can't play all of the arrows fired, etc. So it's just basically a numbers crunch. You compare numbers, and this side wins, this side loses. Now, I plugged in the numbers from the attacking army. And there are different factors. There's a leadership factor, an experience factor, a training factor, etc. This is what we get. A leadership factor based on Garrick and Perith, a leadership factor of 7, an experience factor of 5, a training factor of 5, they have been getting ready for this sort of thing, an equipment factor of 5, and that brings us to a basic force rating of 23 and a battle rating of 26. Keep that number in mind. How about the defenders? Well, Honeywood has a total of 69 people ready to fight. That includes the named characters, Sir Trevor, Sulix, etc., and the PCs, as well as 16 town guards, 45 armed townsmen. Of those, 23 are archers. All of the guards plus 7 of the townsmen who are hunters also have bow and arrow and know how to use them. The rest of the townsfolk are armed with spears, axes that they use to chop up wood, whatever they can lay their hands on. Put into the system, this brings us to a leadership factor of 5, an experience factor of 8. This is where Sulix and Supple and Trevor really help out. A training factor, though, of only 1, because most of the troops are the townspeople. They don't have any training. An equipment factor of 5. The gear is relatively similar overall. A special troop factor of 4. This is the spellcasters, right? This is if you have magical creatures or spellcasters, etc., special troops. So they get a rating of 4 for that, bringing their basic force rating to 23 and their battle rating to 28. Keep that number in mind. 26 for the attackers, 28 for the defenders. But that's not all. The battle rating is just where you start. There is also troop ratio. And here the attackers have the distinct advantage. 69 defenders, 123 attackers. Advantage to the attackers, troop ratio bonus of 30. Morale. Now in this case, the kobolds and the gnolls are attacking kind of for revenge, so there's a little bit behind that. But Honeywood is fighting for its life. They are defending their home, their families, so they get the morale advantage by 10 points. Environment. Here there's something on both sides. 20 points go to the attackers because it is a nighttime attack and they can see in the dark. That helps. 25 points, however, go to the defenders because they're on home turf. They know the layout. They are in their own territory, so they get 25. So a slight advantage to the defenders. Then the key element, terrain. For the attackers, it's relatively neutral. They're on farmland, open ground. There's nothing special about it, nothing helpful or hurtful. But the defenders are defending a fortified position. Now, it's not a huge castle, it's not enormously strong, but it is a fortified position, and those are force multipliers, right? Whenever you're behind a wall, you've got a force multiplier. And so they get 60 added to their column, meaning that this is an overwhelming victory for the defenders, for Honeywood. 123 to 76 being the final numbers. What this will determine is the outcome of the battle, but also the number of casualties and what state the army is in afterward. Are they absolutely shocked? Are they just a little angry? What state are they in afterward? Totally demoralized, etc. So, this is the big battle that's going to happen. I've already told you the outcome. You already know that part. Okay, that's the big battle, the whole thing. But within that, there are individual battles, and they can go either way. One skirmish can go one way while the entire battle goes the other way, right? And this is what I love about this system. It takes care of all the big scale stuff. I don't have to roll for every sword swing, every spear thrown, every arrow shot, etc. But we do get to play the individual encounter. And that is where we will start next time. We're under attack!